and welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Plek, and we are recording live from Austin, Texas. And we are so excited to bring you faith, culture, and everything in between. And joining me in studio today is Ava's mom. That would be Mrs. Catie Sas. So glad to have you in studio.
Thanks.
And then also with us once again from the Cody Sparks band, Cody Sparks.
Still here.
All right, so we have, we actually were just talking before the show about Catie at the gym. So Catie, you working out with Adrian?
Yes. Well, she was doing her thing.
And you were doing yours?
Mine,
Yeah. All right, worked out. All right, so we have a question that came up, and I think this question actually came up at our men's group.
Oh, no.
And it was a disaster, right?
Is this contraception?
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, so...
It was a disaster, the men's group. People probably didn't come back because of this.
Yeah, it was so bad. Not because it's a bad question.
Right.
But because it was asked at a men's group.
And 34 men.
And there was 35, 40 guys there sitting there staring at each other going, and we went around and around and around.
And it did. And it didn't ever stop.
It wouldn't stop. I tried to land the plane several times on this one question. And
Who brought it up?
We love Dan. Hey, Danny from the Blue Hour Brewing actually brought it up, and I was really grateful for his question. It just was not the right place.
No.
There were no women around?
Well, it was only men.
Group.
It was a men's group.
Beer, beef, and Bible?
Beer, beef.
Men?
Yeah, it was all men.
It's a hilarious question to bring up
Yeah.
with men.
Let's just say,
it was weird.
It took the whole 30 minutes of time that we have to go through our stuff. It took all of it.
Like, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall.
It was not pretty. It was like, Jordan, you were there, right, Jordan?
Mad?
Yes.
Yeah, Jordan, were you there for that?
Yes. As I said.
The memory is so painful, he can't bring himself back to it. Yeah, we just went around and around and around. And so...
Was there like a consensus? Like, was there like a kind of idea?
I don't even know. I just felt like we tried to land the plane and kind of move the conversation on, and then someone
would bring it back.
It was like, why? What are you doing? It was like...
It would come down like this, and then it would take off because someone would... Really, it would be a ridiculous question or a comeback.
Yeah.
With what they were asking.
All right.
Or saying.
Yeah, let's just get to it because it's so crazy that... I would love to see how you respond to this question, Catie, because I truly think you would have loved to have been there. All right, as Christians, we're called to live in accordance with God's will and not our own. With that said, how can we justify the use of contraceptives, birth control, onanism?
What even is that?
Oh, man. Do you know who Onan is in the Bible?
Onan?
Onan. Not Conan, but Onan.
I guess not.
So it's Judah's son, whose wife was Tamar, but Onan wasn't the first husband of Tamar. He was a brother his brother married Tamar and then died, and then he married Tamar. And because he did not want to take care of sons that would not be spiritually his, even though they biologically would be, he pulled out.
Yeah.
And so his seed went onto the ground, and so therefore God took him out for that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's why some people believe that
pulling out
is sin. Or in other words,
would that
like wasting your seed?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Onanism.
So they probably think that about condoms?
So yeah, let's get to the question.
Okay.
So so contraceptives, birth control, onanism, even natural family planning within marriage isn't any attempt to prevent conception an example of us acting in our own will instead of God's. Children are a blessing from the Lord, and they are a blessing that not everyone can receive. Should those of us that can conceive not take that gift for granted? Should we be open to the possibility of life in every loving conjugal act within marriage? If we aren't we saying that we know more than God as to what's best for us and our families? Some might say that this is just strict Catholic doctrine that doesn't apply to all Christians. But it's important to note that up until the 1930s, both Catholics and Protestants were in agreement that contraceptives, birth control, and the like were not permissible. The new stance of Protestants is less than a century old. Scripture did not change in the 30s, so why did the teaching change? Okay. Whew. The look on your face is the look of most of the men in our group that night. Okay. That is a great question. And so let's sort of walk this.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think this is an important issue. And all joking aside, I really do think this is important because I think when you think birth control, you may not know how all birth control works. And that can be problematic because there are some contraceptives that are effective after conception. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for example, before I was a Christian, I was sexually active, and there was one night where there was an issue with the condom, and the next morning I had to go to Walgreens and get the Plan B pill.
Right.
And I mean, now as a believer, I would never take it like now, but
right. Was it like just a pill you took, like, like taking a Skittle and you just,
It was literally a $30 pill.
$30 pill.
And I took it, and it like causes you to bleed and you cramp a lot.
Is this a morning after pill?
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
And so and honestly, I don't quite know how it works. I don't know the like process at which it runs through your body. But I do know that it sucked, and it's kind of like maybe it ends conception, or it like somehow disrupts the process of conception. I don't know if you take it you have to take it soon,
right?
Which is why it's called the morning after pill.
Yep.
So if I were to wait until maybe there was life already conceived, but then I also don't really know.
So birth control kind of works in
birth control prevents your uterus from being able to
release an egg, right?
No, to hold like your uterine lining
becomes
bleeds.
thin.
Yes, so your uterine lining isn't thick enough
to hold a fertilized egg.
Yes, there's probably a better explanation, but that's what I've got now.
So I think that the hormones in birth control cause essentially three things. So one is it thins the lining of the uterus so that a fertilized egg is less likely to attach.
Yes. So that's why periods are your uterine lining shedding.
That's a good visual. All right, and then, or number two, it thickens the cervical mucus to keep sperm from entering the uterus. Okay, that's the other way it works.
Okay.
Or then it stops or reduces ovulation, so the releasing of egg into the ovary.
It'd be great if we had like a lady doctor on the show.
We do need a lady doctor.
Gynecologist to explain this to us.
This is where my kids are about to go through sex ed, or at least at fourth grade. They have the initial puberty talk. I'm not sure if they have birth control questions yet. But so I feel like this is where it's those are the primary things. And so reducing ovulation and thickening cervical mucus to keep sperm from entering the uterus, those are two, I think, positive ways. I don't know if positive's the right way to put this.
Like okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay ways. But thinning the line of the uterus so that fertilized egg is less likely to attach, I think that's where it can get controversial. Mm-hmm. Because when does life begin?
Yeah. That's where there are a lot of girls that I know that don't do birth control like at all.
Right.
They don't take the pill. They don't do anything.
Right.
Because they would agree with this question that
right.
like any attempt to stand in the way or alter pregnancy is
mm-hmm.
like getting in the way of God's plan.
Right.
And so because of like where conception begins, which again, I don't actually know a ton about.
Yeah, but I think we can say when life begins, this is why I don't.
meets the egg.
Onanism, that always
when the
makes me
sperm
giggle.
meets-
But onanism, I don't think is
But
the
I know
sin
a lot
of
of Christians that
onan.
pull out.
What's that?
I know a lot of Christians that pull out.
Right.
Pull and pray.
Right. But onanism is the sin of Onan wasn't pulling out. The sin of Onan was not furthering his brother's line and being selfish with Tamar because he was supposed to take care of her, which then ultimately Judah married her and they had twins, which the line of Jesus comes through, which is sort of wild. So when you think about it, Judah married his son's wife.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why it's so weird.
Okay.
Yeah. So Onan messes the whole line of Jesus up, I guess. Not really, but
So he wanted a younger woman.
well, he didn't want it. So when his wife died, he went to visit the shrine prostitute.
Yeah, and that was Tamar.
Yeah, Genesis
But he
38,
didn't know.
classic
which
time. Yeah.
I don't understand how he wouldn't have known. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, it's not like
What? Did she like cover her entire
Hold on.
face?
I mean, do you wear contacts?
No.
Okay. My wife wears contacts, and without contacts,
I do. And I'm very blind.
Yeah, very blind. So let's say someone dressed themselves up as somebody else, and would you fall for it?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Probably
especially if they
because they
didn't
wouldn't
talk.
be looking at the.
Yeah.
And you don't know the lighting back then. Was it candles?
Yeah, I'm sure it was
pitch
candlelit,
black?
and
Was it moonlight?
Okay.
You know, I'm
But
just-
it
Was it outside? Was
but
it in a
said
tent?
She was in the on the street or on the corner.
Well, she was
like,
near the shrine. I mean, so she was like the shrine. I mean,
Maybe it was dark. I don't know.
mean, you know,
Anyways,
when do you hook up with a prostitute? Probably not in the daylight.
there are plenty of men that
Okay.
Oh,
just
lady
in
of
the
the night.
daylight.
Yeah, I guess. So Judah hooks up with Tamar, thinking it's a random prostitute because he was lonely and he wanted some action, and was not a good move by him. But then he impregnates Tamar. They have twins. He takes care of her. Doesn't have sex with her ever again, but he takes her on as a wife and provides for her.
And God shows His mercy through using that sin as to redeem.
Right, but that was the sin of Onan, was not providing for his wife or providing for his brother and for his wife, and essentially having someone to have sex with. But
He was just being selfish.
he was being selfish. Yes, selfish.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that. All right, so let me pull back that question. So I don't think onanism is an issue. And so, but this is what I mean by that, is it's not that we're supposed to have, I think we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. I have 4 children. And to be fair, every time that we were pregnant, or every time we had the opportunity to be pregnant, we were. It was kind of a wild deal.
Yeah.
We had 2 miscarriages, but
This is where my question about adoption comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ryan and I do not plan to have another biological child.
Mm-hmm.
Because we eventually, when the time comes when we want to adopt.
Right.
And so we do practice family planning and we use condoms. I guess I don't know if that's TMI for people, but
No, that's great.
we are intentionally not trying to have another child.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
honestly, what I would have loved to have done, obviously it wasn't God's plan because we got pregnant like month 2 with Ava of Shrine. But I would have loved to like only adopt my children.
Really?
And so
Why is that?
The verse like be fruitful and multiply, sometimes I'm like, well, so does that mean that like having children is more favorable than adopting a child? Because there are plenty of children that need to be
Well, I just
adopted.
don't think that. I think
Maybe that wasn't an issue back then.
Well, yeah, but no, I think adopting children is something that God does. So when we emulate that, I think that's very positive. I don't think there's 0 negative connotation to adoption. I would put that into the being fruitful and multiplying is when you take on someone else's child because that child's already there.
Okay.
So
it
I
doesn't
definitely
mean
don't. I don't think
the
you're
child has
like.
to come out of you.
I just be fruitful and multiply. I feel like was.
It was told to Noah.
Well, yes, and it was also told to Adam and Eve. And then it's told to us in a unique way. Okay, here's what I mean by that. So with Jesus, with Paul, they were single. And their way of multiplication wasn't through sex and procreation. Their way of multiplication was through the gospel being spread and going forward. So I think that that dispensation of the reality of what your role here on the planet to obey God is now different. So I don't think it's wrong to have babies. I think that's actually very good within the context of marriage with all the things and I'm not saying that you need to wait till you can properly provide. It's like, when do you get married? When I have enough money. When do you have enough money? Probably never. Okay, so I don't want to put any, but for people who are, there's a capacity that you can hit. I think we hit our capacity at 4 children. I think we nailed it. Like,
it's okay to say, okay, this is the amount of children that we can have.
Yeah,
that we can manage well.
Right.
Because God wants you to manage your household well.
Absolutely. I think that's a big deal. And would he give you capacity to have more or be more? Maybe.
Yeah, if Adrian got pregnant again, then that would mean that God is going to provide and equip you to have capacity for more.
Right. So yes. So I think the simple answer to your question is it okay for me to have this desire to adopt? Yes. I think it would be okay for you to desire to have no children. I think that would be an okay
and that's
desire.
kind of the same thing with some people are supposed to get married and some people aren't. Wouldn't it be some people should get married or have kids and some shouldn't?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think this goes with, don't judge another person's servant based on your own spiritual convictions. Because I think the freedom in Christ is so broad and covers so much. And I don't think that that you having children, like there's a verse that, but the women will be saved through childbearing. And you're like,
yeah, not
what does
every-
that mean?
Well, because the thing is, I have no idea if we just decided to, you know what, let's start being intentional about having another child, like about me giving birth. Like, I might get pregnant again right away, and so some people might say that's a waste. You are wasting the opportunity to follow God's plan and birth another child. But I also think that God has given me this deep, deep desire for over a decade. And so that can't be a mistake. Like and so I think there's this fear that I have of someone that can't get pregnant. Like, there's a woman that cannot get pregnant.
Right.
And she has tried for years. There are plenty of women that we all know that cannot
Right. Oh, that's
get
a big deal.
pregnant. Whereas, but they don't feel caught to adopt. And so they just don't ever have children. And whereas, me, I got pregnant with Ava right away. There's probably a good chance I'd get pregnant with our second right away or soon after. But I'm choosing not to.
Do you wrestle with that, or you?
No, I don't. Mm-hmm. But I've had conversations with other women where they're kind of like, oh, but what if you want to have another? And it's kind of like, well, I don't. I don't want to have another child. And I would have been content with not even have, obviously we love Ava, and I'm so thankful that I had her, and that was God's plan, was for me to have Ava. But, I do not feel called to have another child. I feel called to adopt.
Yeah. And so how are you going forward in the adoption process?
We are preventing pregnancy. We are intentionally preventing pregnancy.
Is there a year at which you feel is there a certain financial goal you're trying to reach, or?
Oh, so when Ava's a little bit older, because we
want to parent her well.
We want to parent her well, and we also, I think, there's a grace period where you're learning so much. Ryan and I have learned so much about discipline and discipline together. Right. Because you can have two people in marriage that think they're good at discipline, but they're on two separate pages.
What's the difference between you and Ryan?
Well, so I thought that I was going to be calm and I thought that I was going to be the calm parent, because Ryan was the one that would get angry in our fights before kids. He was the one that was so I was well, Ryan will be the disciplinarian, and I'll you can have two ideas of how you think discipline is going to go. Right. And then you're faced with the reality of that's not at all what you thought it was going to be. And so basically you're learning, whenever you bring a child into your home that's experienced trauma, you cannot screw it up. Like,
Right.
you've got to have your crap together because, like, for me, struggling with anger issues, it's, I'm in therapy right now because of, like,
How's
childhood
that going?
trauma. It's going great. Great, really great.
Sorry about the Smash
And
Brothers music the other day.
Oh, jeez, that was not my fault.
So there's a lot that I'm learning right now. And I think God is molding me and he's growing me and he's sanctifying me in this season of life so that whenever we do bring a child into our home, whether they're 1, 2, 3 years old,
Right.
because Ava will probably be about 4 or maybe even 5 whenever this happens. And so we're going to be a 1-kid household for quite a while longer, unless God just quickens this process.
Right.
But right now, I think that God is sanctifying me in a way that I never would have been sanctified had we not had Ava. And so, because whenever you bring a child into your home that's been in the foster care system, you cannot spank. Like, I guess if you adopt them, then they're yours and you can't. But like, while they're in foster care, you can, there is a specific way you are allowed to discipline them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before I had Ava, I had a very clear idea of what I thought I was going to be like. And that's clearly not the case.
So how are you?
Well, I struggle with anger and violence.
Violence is a little bit strong of a word.
Well,
You like to spank.
okay, maybe aggression. So I would have these really angry outbursts and just this didn't happen all the time. This was 2 or 3 times where I would just slap Ava in the leg.
Yeah.
Boom, slap her in the leg. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot keep doing this.
Because it was out of anger.
It was out of this deep, anguishing anger,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't know where it came from. And so
So do you feel like the therapy they're going through now, Christian therapy, where you're walking through, is it helping that?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very significantly, yeah. Because you need practical tools.
Yeah.
In order to help you
how do you, so when that anger comes on, how do you deal with it now?
Well, there are different steps that I take. So I can either breathe. I have a rule where if I'm angry, I don't go near her. I can't.
Right.
It is in her own safety that I do not go near her when I'm mad. Because the only way that I knew how to handle anger growing up was to get smacked.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, I can't do this to my 2-year-old. And eventually, whenever we do foster to adopt or however that looks, I'm going to need to know how to handle my emotions. I'm going to need to, God is using Ava to grow me and sanctify me for what he has in the future.
Right.
And so, I clearly had no idea that I was going to unleash this kind of anger as a mom, because I totally thought I was going to I don't really know how to explain it, but I didn't know this trauma was going to rise up and completely consume me in these moments of anger. And so this is a period where I'm healing and I'm growing so that I can manage a household well with a child that's adopted or in the foster care system.
Okay, good. So I want to kind of get some of these questions here that I want to make sure we answer them. Is any attempt to prevent contraception an example of us acting in our own will instead of God's? And I would say, God has given you a wisdom. He's given you, you can ask him at any point, James 1:5, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask of God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. It will be given to him. So I think you can ask God, but I feel like this is one of those things that's not how many children should you have is not as many as your body can possibly pump out. I don't think that's the answer. I think but I do think it's something that you need to talk to God about. I definitely think that that's true. You guys are at 1 child. Is there any hope for more in the Cody Sparks band?
I almost said something I know I shouldn't have said. I'm glad I didn't say it. I used to say it all the time, but I don't anymore.
It's good.
No,
healthy moving forward.
We don't say no.
Yeah.
I mean, if it happened, it happened.
Yeah. That's good. And I love that. So,
do you use any contraception?
pull and pray.
Pull and pray.
No,
All
but
right.
well, like back to the birth control thing.
Mhm.
She was on it for a very long time, but then it felt like it was just kind of messing her up and things like that. So she ended up getting off of it
Yeah.
for health reasons, and she's felt better. And I've noticed a difference. So I'm like, don't get back on it.
Right.
But
right.
then you're like, oh crud,
Now
we
you gotta
have
figure
to be
something
careful.
else out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was us.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something to birth control that I don't think I ever fully understood because I just am a dude and I don't know about birth control things. And so I think there's, like I said, if what you're doing is stopping a release of an egg, or if what you're doing is like thickening cervical mucus to help prevent sperm from entering, fine. But if you can't do that without thinning the lining of the uterus so that if a fertilized egg did attach, because I think that's the part that becomes problematic, right? That's you took a life, and again, teeny life, still life. This is where when Christians sort of battled out for pro-life, I think this is where you should take a stance here of understanding that if the birth control you're taking thins out your uterine lining so that a fertilized egg would not attach, that becomes problematic. So I think that's the one thing to be just conscious of, because I think a lot of Christians don't know that, because I wouldn't have known that. Like as a dude, like that's not something I would know. So I think that's where the research on what type of contraception or pill that you're looking at.
Pray about the kind of
Yeah,
contraception
that becomes really important. So,
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Nicole?
So, in my opinion, a fertilized egg is not yet life.
Oh.
Because you're considered pregnant when that fertilized egg successfully attaches to your uterine wall.
Hmm.
Even with in vitro fertilization
Mm-hmm.
things, like they will fertilize multiple eggs, but you're not pregnant if that egg doesn't
Yeah.
attach. So
Yeah, so we're talking about embryos?
even if you're not taking birth control, you could have an egg that's fertilized, but it doesn't
Yeah, this is where it gets to be such a.
you're not.
So what
Yeah.
Nicole said was that a fertilized egg, you're not considered pregnant until that fertilized egg attaches to the uterine lining, and so I think this is where this is where it gets so specific. Is life begin at when the egg is fertilized? Does life begin when it attaches to the uterine wall? And who is going to determine that? I think that becomes part of the reason why you've got to do your own research to really figure out where your convictions take you. And what is conception then, right? So that becomes like, what is conception?
Well-
And I think that's where as Christians, again, who has time to think about all this? Well, if you're wanting to get pregnant and have babies, this is the time. This is the time to think about that.
I mean, there are even women that don't support doing things like IVF and
Right.
stuff like, because they feel like that is taking charge of like playing God and like trying to be,
But they really want to be parents.
yeah,
That's hard. Well, my sister did this, and she wanted to be a mom forever, and she went through like 5 years of trying, didn't. They did IVF, and it was like, maybe it'll take, it won't. And then it did. And then she had Reagan, and then we have a niece, and then now Reagan's almost 3, and then randomly, my sister got pregnant naturally.
Oh, wow.
Right. And has a 6-7-month-old
Hmm.
boy. So it's so crazy, weird.
yeah.
Like couldn't get pregnant for 5 years, did IVF, couldn't, did, and then naturally later got pregnant again.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like there are moms that I know that they've been married for like 15 years and they have no kids because they never could get pregnant naturally, but they were so against doing it medically. And so
But then it kind of gets weird, kind of like you were saying with IVF, where the fertilized eggs are there and they're just there. What do you do with those fertilized eggs
yeah.
that they still have of like people?
And then there are people that
Does that-
say,
if you-
do not toss them out.
Correct. If you throw them out, does that mean you're
that
a
means
baby
you're
killer?
aborting
Right.
life. Yeah.
That's where it gets really,
There's
really
so
crazy.
many different circles to
Right.
go
Sure.
through. It's,
Also the same with kind of like he was saying with like your seed. If you were to
Yeah.
do that on your own, that stuff that guys do by themselves, and you let that go out there. I don't feel comfortable saying
Or
certain
known
things.
as masturbation.
Yes, I'll let you say that. But doing that, and then every time you do that, are you blowing seed? Is that
Yeah, I don't think so. The blowing of seed
right?
is not like you didn't waste seed because your body
I don't say that
naturally-
you do, but people do say that you do that.
Well, no, that's I think that would be like a scientific myth, right? Like
Sure.
because you have that with
Gosh, how long is this episode?
We haven't been on that.
like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We've only been talking for 15 minutes?
It's at 30.
Oh, 30
Oh, we're
minutes.
at 30.
Okay. I was like, it's got to be longer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that, yeah, this is such a complicated issue of birth control, but just studying the facts, you don't want, not all birth control prevent sperm from fertilizing an egg, right? And so that's the biggest thing. The question of whether some forms of the pill may have an have an effective abortion rather than just preventing ovulation. And so you must exercise due care in choosing a form of birth control that is unquestionably a contraceptive as opposed to possibly being abortive. That would be my position.
Yeah.
Don't go down a path where you could possibly abort.
Sin.
Yes, yeah. And sin,
Like, okay, but here's the thing. Ultimately, God is in control.
absolutely.
Because there are people that still get pregnant using condoms. There are people that get pregnant
On birth control.
on birth
On
control.
birth control.
There are people that have tried to abort their babies and
Yep.
their babies survived. So it's like, if God wants you to have a baby, you're having a baby. Like, it's not.
Yes, but remember, it's like this is where you want. Ignorance is bliss in many ways, and I think the reality of where we are as a nation when we're in the thick of such pro-life, pro-choice debates, and for Christians the answer is pro-life. Well, at what point are you pro-life?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part where I think a lot of us are pro-life until it gets inconvenient. And
That's exactly
and
correct.
then you're like, I don't want to, that's weird, right? So I feel like the pro-life stance is going to be one of, and listen, I get it that if this is not your belief system, then you're kind of pushing back a little. I understand that. But I feel like when we don't take the time on this particular issue to sort of figure out where we stand, where we think life begins, how that whole thing operates, is it when the egg is fertilized? Is it when the egg and the fertilized egg is attached to uterine lining? Where is that? And is there anything abortive about it? How does that make you feel? I think that's important to wrestle with. Otherwise, later on you go, I may have done something I don't actually agree with, right? And I think a lot of people just head into it with ignorance. And in our polarized culture now, I think with so much information thrown at you, I think do the research that you need to do, and then make the decision that's going to lead your convictions along with the Holy Spirit to figure out where life begins. And and talk to me about it. I'd love to talk about it. Yeah. All right. It's a lot. Any other thoughts
And hints on doing that with the men's group.
That was the men's group.
With 30
that was awful. All right,
30-something men talking about this. I cannot
it was like
even.
so weird when we were just like,
So
And so
many,
there were a
and
bunch
there
of
was only
guys
like
that had
4 people
strong
talking
opinions.
about it.
Like, there were certain people that had really strong opinions about it,
Oh,
or
yeah.
everyone was just confused.
a lot of confusion, and a lot of random
The
comments.
the 30 people who weren't talking out of the 34 were very confused. There's 4 people talking, and the others were just sitting there going, huh?
Yeah,
Ryan was
And
there?
why are we talking about this?
I think Ryan was there, but I think
He didn't talk about it.
no.
That's not surprising.
It was great,
Oh gosh. So we definitely had to. I tried to table it, and I said we'll talk about it on the podcast. We did talk about it on the podcast. It's very confusing. So, but I do appreciate the question because I do
good
think it's
question.
something that people wrestle with, and I think it's important for you to wrestle further. And so,
It's a giant umbrella.
it is a giant umbrella. Hey, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, you want to text us 737-231-0605, and we would love to talk about it, even if we don't have some great answers. We got answers. And we can talk faith, culture, everything in between, and really kind of talk about how does the gospel intersect in every one of these issues. I'm really excited that you would come in and talk about it with us. Go to pastorplek.com. Let us know you're listening. Make sure you share, subscribe, do all the things, and we will hear from you and from our house to yours. Have an awesome week of worship.